Good Wednesday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for April the 5th. Today, we are reading together in Leviticus chapter 25, which is going to detail for us the instructions and procedures concerning the Sabbath years and the year of Jubilee. This is a text that, unfortunately, we might be paying more attention to right now than many who lived within Israel. By the time Jeremiah comes along, one of his rebukes actually towards the people of God is the fact that they have ignored the Sabbath day years. And I think the time frame of that is they had ignored 490 years worth of Jubilee years, which equals 70 Jubilee years, because it's every 7 years is, or excuse me, every 59 years is Jubilee years, something like that. Therefore, the thought that is had is that they would then spend that number of Jubilee years or sabbatical years in captivity, which is the 70 years of captivity. So there are a lot of tie-ins here with later on in Israel's history, and it would have been good for them to listen to what's going on here and to make sure to follow the instructions of God that are given to them by Moses here on Mount Sinai. So let's read along together today about the Sabbath years and the Jubilee years and see what all is going on for them concerning Israel and their observance of these special years. Let's read together here in Leviticus chapter 25 and verse number 1. Leviticus 25, verse number 1, Yahweh spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai, "Speak to the Israelites and tell them, when you enter the land I'm giving you, the land will observe a Sabbath to Yahweh. You may sow your field for 6 years, and you may prune your vineyard and gather its produce for 6 years. But there will be a Sabbath of complete rest for the land in the 7th year, a Sabbath to Yahweh. You are not to sow your field or prune your vineyard. You are not to reap what grows by itself from your crop, or harvest the grapes of your untended vines. It is to be a year of complete rest for the land. Land is to lay fallow for this year. Whatever," verse number 6, Leviticus 25, verse number 6, "whatever the land produces during the Sabbath year can be food for you, for yourself, your male or female slave, and the hired worker or alien who resides with you. All of its growth may serve as food for your livestock and the wild animals in your land. You are to count 7 sabbatical years, 7 times 7 years, so that the time period of the 7 sabbatical years amounts to 49. Then you are to sound a ram's horn loudly in the 7th month on the 10th day of the month. You will sound it throughout your land on the Day of Atonement." So this is connected with the Day of Atonement. "You are to consecrate the 50th year and proclaim freedom in the land for all its inhabitants. It will be your Jubilee, when each of you is to return to his property and each of you to his clan. The 50th year will be your Jubilee. You are not to sow, reap what grows by itself, or harvest its untended vines. It is to be holy to you, because it is the Jubilee. You may only eat its produce directly from the field. In this year of Jubilee, each of you will return to his property. If you make a sale to your neighbor or purchase from him, do not cheat one another. You are to make the purchase from your neighbor based on the number of years since the last Jubilee. He is to sell to you based on the number of remaining harvest years. You are to increase its price in proportion to a greater amount of years, and decrease its price in proportion to a lesser amount of years, because what he is selling to you is a number of harvests. You are not to cheat one another, but fear your God, for I am Yahweh, your God. You are to keep my statutes and ordinances and carefully observe them, so that you may live securely in the land. Then the land will yield its fruit, so that you can eat, be satisfied, and live securely in the land. If you wonder, what will we eat in the 7th year if we don't sow or gather our produce? I will appoint my blessing for you in the 6th year, so that it will produce a crop sufficient for 3 years. When you sow in the 8th year, you will be eating from the previous harvest. You will be eating this until the 9th year, when its harvest comes in. The land is not to be permanently sold, because it is mine, and you are only aliens and temporary residents on my lands. You are to allow the redemption of any land you occupy. If your brother becomes destitute and sells part of his property, his nearest relative may come and redeem what his brother has sold. If a man has no family redeemer, but he prospers and obtains enough to redeem his land, he may calculate the years since its sale, repay the balance to the man he sold it to, and return to his property. But if he cannot obtain enough to repay him, what he sold will remain in the possession of its purchaser until the year of Jubilee. It is to be released at the Jubilee so that he may return to his property. If a man sells a residence in a walled city, his right of redemption will last until a year has passed after its sale. His right of redemption will last a year. It is not redeemed. If it is not redeemed by the end of a full year, then the house in the walled city is permanently transferred to its purchaser throughout his generations. It is not to be released on the Jubilee, but houses in settlements that have no walls around them are to be classified as open fields. The right to redeem such houses stays in effect, and they are to be released at the Jubilee. Concerning the Levitical cities, the Levites always have the right to redeem houses in the cities they possess. Whatever property one of the Levites can redeem, a house sold in a city they possess is to be released at the Jubilee, because the houses in the Levitical cities are their possession among the Israelites. The open pasture land around their cities may not be sold, for it is their permanent possession. If your brother becomes destitute and cannot sustain himself among you, you are to support him as an alien or temporary resident so that he can continue to live among you. Do not profit or take interest from him, but fear your God and let your brother live among you. You are not to lend him your silver with interest or sell him your food for profit. I am Yahweh your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to give you the land of Canaan and to be your God. If your brother among you becomes destitute and sells himself to you, you must not force him to do slave labor, or let him stay with you as a hired worker or a temporary resident. He may work for you until the year of Jubilee. Then he and his children are to be released from you, and he may return to his clan and his ancestral property. They are not to be sold as slaves, because they are my servants that I brought out of the land of Egypt. You are not to rule over them harshly, but fear your God. Your male and female slaves are to be from the nations around you. You may purchase male and female slaves. You may also purchase them from the aliens residing among you, or from their families living among you, those born in your land. These may become your property. You may leave them to your sons after you inherit to inherit as property. You can make them slaves for life. But concerning your brothers, the Israelites, you must not rule over one another harshly. If an alien or temporary resident living among you prospers, but your brother living near him becomes destitute and sells himself to the alien living among you, or to a member of the resident alien's clan, he has the right of redemption after he has been sold. One of his brothers may redeem him. His uncle or cousin may redeem him, or any of his close relatives from his clan may redeem him. If he prospers, he may redeem himself. The one who purchased him is to calculate the time from the year he sold himself to him until the year of Jubilee. The price of his sale will be determined by the number of years. It will be set for him like the daily wages of a hired worker. If many years are still left, he must pay his redemption price in proportion to them based on his purchase price. If only a few years remain until the year of Jubilee, he will calculate and pay the price of his redemption in proportion to his remaining years. I will stay with him like a man hired year by year. A resident alien is not to rule over him harshly in your sight. If he is not redeemed in any of these ways, he and his children are to be released at the year of Jubilee. For the Israelites are my servants. They are my servants that I brought out of the land of Egypt. I am Yahweh, your God. And that concludes Leviticus chapter 25 concerning the Sabbath years and Jubilee. You can go to Deuteronomy chapter 15. Actually, you can go there if you want to, but we'll be reading in Deuteronomy 15 here in the next little while, next couple of months or so, as we continue our working our way through the history books. Deuteronomy 15 has a lot to say about these concepts as well, so we'll have some more to say once we get there. But here within Leviticus 25, I think there is a very strong principle that is established, and it concerns the fact that the land belongs to Yahweh. The land belongs to Yahweh. This is his land. Therefore, he has the right. And this language has been used all throughout the text that when you get to the land I am giving you, that says the very thing in verse number 2. When you enter the land I am giving you. So Yahweh being the owner of it, being the owner of all creation, because he made it, of course, he has the ability to say how the land is to be treated. So for them, whenever it comes to the Sabbath year, just as they observe the Sabbath each week, the land itself is to observe a Sabbath year. 6 years they can work it, sow it, prune it, harvest it, but on that 7th year, they need to let it rest. They need to let it rest. That is true for every 7th year. And whenever you do that, share with those around you for what you do have. Once you get, though, to the 50th year, this really special year, this is a year of Jubilee. This is a year of rest, a year of renewal. It is a restart. I believe its association with the Day of Atonement has something a bit to do with it. As if we remember going back, thinking about the Day of Atonement was a reset. It was a day whenever everything was wiped clean, the slate was wiped clean, all the impurities were done away with, all the sins were forgiven, and there is to be unity between Yahweh and their God. So debts are relieved, slavery is relieved, bondage is relieved. All of this is relieved. It's a great year of Jubilee. You are to consecrate the 50th year and proclaim freedom in the land for all its inhabitants. It will be your Jubilee. So everything that was the original way it was, your freedom, your land, all of those things were to be given back and reset back to the way they were previously. Now, there are some stipulations, of course, in dealing with this. There's some commands at the beginning of verse 13 about being honest. If you know that the year of Jubilee is coming up, yet you really need to sell some land because you've fallen on hard times, you can't charge a full price for the land if the people buying it from you are only going to be there for a year or two. And likewise, for those who are buying it, you shouldn't be paying full price for those things. You're to take those things into consideration. And the reason for it, again, is because it ultimately belongs to Yahweh. It doesn't belong to them anyways. So someone might be asking, well, how are they going to take care of themselves if they're to take care of this year of Jubilee and these Sabbath years? Well, the Lord is going to provide. We can read about that in verses 18 through 22, that God will provide for the people, give them enough in the 6th year, for the 7th, 8th, and even into the 9th year. We can see that in verses 18 through 22. Again, it is restated, and really this is a foundational principle here within the text. Verse number 23, the land is not to be permanently sold because it is mine. It is mine, and you are only aliens and temporary residents on my land. So don't get too comfy. Don't become possessive of the land. Definitely don't be stingy with it. It doesn't belong to you anyways. Now, there are some instructions here concerning the transfer of property. If it's in a walled city with no farmland attached to it, therefore it really has much less value, then they have a year to buy it back. If they don't, then it is a permanent transfer to this other family. But if it's a farmland, if it doesn't have walls, then again, Jubilee stipulations come into possession. There's some instructions concerning Levites in verses 32 through 34. Beginning of verse 35. There's issues concerning basically indentured servitude. If your brother, if a Jew, becomes destitute and cannot sustain himself among you, you are to support him as an alien or temporary resident so that he can continue to live among you. So in supporting him, you're not going to benefit off of his poor luck or off of his hard times. You don't profit from him. You don't take interest from him. You don't lend him your silver with interest or sell him your food for profit. You help your brother out. Love your neighbor as yourselves, because after all, that neighbor belongs to Yahweh. That neighbor was bought with a price in Egypt. That neighbor is an image bearer of God. Therefore, you are to care for him appropriately. Now, there's more about this indentured servitude. Give some more ideas about that. If he sells himself to you, you must not force him to do slave labor. Let him stay with you as a hired worker or temporary resident, again, until the year of Jubilee. When Jubilee takes place, he's released and he's able to go back and take care of his land as it was before. There was always this hope of freedom for those who were looking forward to the year of Jubilee. Now, whenever it comes to the slaves that were not of the Jews, that were Gentile slaves, they could remain as permanent slaves. But again, there was to be concern for them simply because they were image bearers of God. If a Jew had to sell himself to a Gentile, I mean, I would have to guess that situation would be extremely shameful for the Jew that would have to do this, to sell himself to a Gentile. But if that were to happen, he has the right of redemption after he has been sold. One of his brothers may redeem him. His uncle might redeem him. His cousin might redeem him. So this could take place. But again, there needs to be fair wages with this. You don't take advantage of people. There needs to be fairness in the way you go about this business whenever it comes to buying them back and making sure that you're doing it with the year of Jubilee, whether how far it is away or how close it is. Make sure those wages are appropriate. And then finally, again, if that doesn't happen, then he and his children will be released at the year of Jubilee. Verse 55, for the Israelites are my servants. They are my servants, and I brought you out of the land of Egypt. I am Yahweh, your God. Again, there's a release at Jubilee. There is looking forward to the time of restoration. Again, it's a reset. It's a renewal for the people. And this is something they should have been practicing. But again, of course, in Israel's history, that was not always the case. Now, just thinking about the concept of Jubilee, again, renewal, restoration, resetting. Many of the things that are described here, servitude, being in debt, having conflict, these are issues that are anti-Eden. They're anti-God's original design. So what we have here then in the year of Jubilee is a reset to a more Edenic-like system where things are reset, things are good once again. And really this is simply looking forward to Jesus in Isaiah 61. We've looked at that quite a few times here recently. Isaiah 61, whenever Jesus stands up in the temple in Luke chapter 4, he grabs the scroll and he begins to read. He begins to read about the Jubilee that he was instituting. Again, a reset, a renewal, a restart for people in him. And that's really what we're looking forward to in Jesus. We're looking forward to that. And really, we're looking forward to that at the end of all things, a reset, a renewal with God and our Lord Jesus Christ. So certainly this principle is very much important for the Jews, but it also is foreshadowing something that we enjoy in Christ and even look forward to in the end of all things. If you have any questions about this text here in Leviticus chapter 25, please feel free to leave that in the comments section below. We'll discuss that with you. Appreciate you tuning in for this reading and hope it has been a blessing to you today. Really cool chapter here in Leviticus chapter 25, reading about the sabbatical year and the year of Jubilee. We'll be gathering for our Bible studies tonight at 7 p.m. Hope that you can join us then as we think about the position of deacons within the church and what the text has to say about deacons in 1 Timothy chapter 3. Looking forward to seeing you all there for all the classes that'll be taking place tonight. Again, thanks for tuning in. Have a great rest of your day, everybody. Take care and God bless.